Greetings, everyone. DFG here. Hey, guys. I want to take a moment briefly, and I'd like to address a subject that's extremely important and a subject that all too often, unfortunately, happens from a relationship standpoint, happens with relationships as it relates to fathers and sons. And I did a video a couple of years back talking about forgiveness of fathers. And this message is a little different than that message because I think in communicating and helping and being, of service, I think it's important that, the voices out here, the voices of the world, the voices, of the country, the voices that care. I think it's extremely important that those voices, are heard. And equally, I think that those voices have to be, have to have the right, have to have a conviction and a commitment, to share, knowledge, so that, those who are not informed can be informed. That said, I want to talk about a situation that happened, in my family with my father, with my siblings. And just recently, it was brought to my attention that my father had a will, and in the will, he left all of his possessions. My father has 11 children, 3 different families, but 11 kids. And my father has passed away now a couple of decades ago. But up until just recently, I came into the knowledge that he had a will. And my father was somewhat prosperous. Give an example, his father left him 156 acres of rich farmland, in the state of Mississippi. And so, and that land had cattle and had lumber or timber, for purpose of lumber, homes, several other things. And but my father, because of an inability to really understand his responsibility to his sons, because my father had 2 girls and 9 sons. My father made the decision that he would leave his entire inheritance that was given to him by his father, to the lady that he happened to be married to at the time of his passing. And, and I only bring this up because it's not so much, there's a disappointment, obviously, that, the inheritance would leave my family's generation, and go into a family that really, other than marriage, is not connected to my father's, generation. And I'm sure my grandfather, when he left, the property land to my father, felt very confident that my father would pass it down, to his sons, who would eventually pass it down, to their sons. But my father, because he could not get past his own rationalization, justification on things that he was embittered, that he made the decision not to leave anything to any of his children and just leave it on, to his wife at the time. And granted, for the ladies who hear, if she was my father's wife, and I understood and would have understood him sharing some of his possessions with her. But to take and give it all to her and not in regard to any of his children, because he was upset with his children for one reason or another, was wrong. And I want to say this to all the fathers in the hearing of my voice. You cannot allow your personal feelings, your emotions, to get in the way of, what is right and what is wrong as it relates to your families. And, when you start looking at inheritance, for example, it is a blessing to receive an inheritance. And matter of fact, I'll read a particular scripture to you. It says Proverbs 13:22. It says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So men who can hear me now, if you look at yourself and you want to say you're a good man, not only should you be thinking in terms of what you're leaving to your children, you should be thinking about what you're leaving to your grandchildren as well. And, this particular scripture, Proverbs 13, calls that man a good man. So if you are embracing that title, good man, then that scripture applies to you. My father, who I feel that by his own self-justification, his own self-righteousness, I'm sure he would have called himself a good man. Many people that I know that knew my father, I knew my father as well, would call my father a good man. But his behaviors did not link up with his reputation, at least not when it mattered the most, and that is where his children were concerned. And the only reason he did not follow through on his inheritance by passing it down to his children's children is because he allowed bitterness to come inside of his heart and used that bitterness to rationalize and justify, robbing his children of their inheritance. And I know robbing sounds like a strong word, but I want to use that word because for the men who can hear what I'm saying to you, I want you to understand the significance of it. Because if you're blessed, in that way, or if someone has blessed you in that way, and if someone has worked hard, 156 acres was given to my father. My father didn't go out there and build it from scratch. He took care of it and he maintained it. But he literally, because of his own bitterness towards his children that he couldn't get by, took his generation and now it's gone. Took his inheritance and literally gave it away. And it's no longer in my bloodline anymore. For my children's children or his children's children. And it was just because of his rational, his bitterness, for lack of a better word. And I know it was bitterness because I had conversation with my father. And I remember him telling me, and I'm saying this again because I want to help. Not airing my dirty laundry. You follow me? But the only way we can really understand a problem, and the only way we can really have solutions to problems, we have to be willing to be transparent, men. And so this is in the name of transparency that I share this message with you. My father, I remember, prior to him passing, sitting with me, and my father went down the list. I'm not giving this brother anything because he said a bad word in front of me. I'm not giving this brother inheritance because he smoked marijuana around me. I'm not giving this brother something because he's gay. I'm not giving this brother something. And it was just amazing listening to my father. And by the way, my father left his family, left my mother when I was 7 years old. My mother had 8 kids. 6 of them were his kids. And he abandoned his family, in the housing projects of New Orleans. So, sitting there telling me, 15 years later about why all of my family members, with the exception of me and another brother, were not fit, to receive an inheritance from him, was ludicrous to me. I was like, wow, man, this man really doesn't get it. But yet in his mind, he really understood. He really felt like he was doing the right thing. And he wanted to give me and one of my brothers a part of it. And I remember telling him at the time, and I have to say this in transparency, that I didn't see how I could take something, my brother could take something from him and not share it with all of his other children. And that's where we kind of left that conversation. And unfortunately, I don't, I thought I was being amicable with him. I said that word. I thought I was being decent with him by being honest with him. I didn't, I didn't say I didn't want anything. I just said that I'd rather just think about it. And, later on he passed, and obviously the story is what you've already heard. But, I say again to the fathers, look, you can be upset with your sons and your daughters. You can be upset with your marriage, or maybe you've been in a divorce and you're upset. But none of that should get in the way of you doing what's right by your children or by those who will be a part of your inheritance. There's no justification for it. It's wrong. And, in judgment, my father is going to have to, be confronted with that. You follow me? You took an inheritance that was given to you and you did not pass it down because you were bitter. And I'm telling you, bitterness is a cancer. And I would say this to women too. If you hold in animosity or bitterness in your heart towards your children, don't die with that. Because if you do, you're going to make the same error this man made. And that is cutting off generations for the rest of eternity, because all he could see was the way that seemed right to him. And, and there's a scripture that says there's a way that seemed right to a man, and the end of that way leads to total destruction. It really uses the word death, but I decided to put destruction in there because obviously I don't want to see that consequence befall anyone. But I hope this message helps. And you say, so you come back and you say, okay, Dale, what's the message inside the message? The message inside the message is that you can't say you love your family and then turn your back on your family when you get upset with your family. You can't say you love your family and because your family doesn't meet your standard of what you would call, good, and turn your back on your family. You can't say you love your family and because your family did not meet what your standard of excellence is and you turn your back on your family. You follow me? Because love, suffered all things. Love beareth all things. Love is patient. Love is kind. And love is definitely, a mind and a spirit to forgive. Again, you don't have to like their behavior. You don't have to like what someone has done to you. But that does not excuse you when it comes down to doing what is right by your children, men. Okay? So that's the message here, is that regardless, if there's animosity between you and your son, that's fine. Deal with it. If you can't come together and have a conversation and work through it, do not allow your blessing, do not allow, a blessing that came to you to leave you and become a curse upon you because you couldn't get out of your feelings. You couldn't get out of your emotions, okay? Men are supposed to be, men and women, it's the right way, supposed to be logical. There should be equity in everything that we do. We should understand, both ends and look at things from a 190-degree perspective, looking at it from your perspective and the next man's perspective. And, and then at the end of the day, if there's no substitute for doing the right thing, okay? Even if you don't want to do the right thing, there's still no substitute for not doing the right thing. So I hope this helps, men. Don't be like my father. I suspect that, my father was a strong believer. It doesn't sound like it with that behavior, but according to what he always told us, he was a strong believer. So that means he has to go before the Most High and he has to explain himself. And I can imagine that conversation is not going to go very well. Don't let that happen to you, okay? Guys, again, thank you for listening. Let love be love. Fathers, love your children, and even when they let you down, love them anyway. There was a time you were a child and support. I'm sure all of us has let somebody down before and probably will let down some more people in the future, okay? Love you guys. Thank you for listening. May all the blessings that comes your way reaches your door, all right? And you possess them. Good night, everybody. DFG Squanto. By the way, please subscribe to the channel if you like the content. And if you have any comments, please leave that for me to learn from or glean from as well. Okay? Bye, everybody. Good night.